Hello and hi and welcome to episode number 9. I definitely wasn't sure if we would get even this far when we started, but I'm pretty glad that we have. It's been fun, and today, I mean, I just can't pretend like this isn't on my mind because that would be stupid. Today, the person who is the reason why we're all where we are, congregated on this interwebby thing, Mr. Alt Schwift X himself, gave a big time shout out in his new episode today to not only our Schwifty Squwad YouTube channel, but also specifically this Harry Potter series. So, amongst others, don't get me wrong, but just, hey, but since we're doing the Harry Potter thing right now, that's why I'm mentioning it. It was a glorious thing to have happen at the beginning of the video too, not like just a random mention right before he says cheers and he's out, like legit placement, and featured our YouTube channel in his featured channels. So a big thank you, sir. Thank you very much. That's it's very nice. That's it's what it is. It's very nice. And I appreciate it, and we all appreciate it. I can speak for everyone because we all talked, and yes. So, today we have an episode in which, or a chapter I should say, hang on, I'm trying to make sure I have my notes in front of me too. I made notes and everything, not a bunch, but just a few things I want to make sure I don't miss. Anyway, chapter number 9 in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone is called The Midnight Duel. And this chapter pretty much sets up, it's already set up the rivalry, antagonistic situation between Harry and Draco Malfoy, which, by the way, I was discussing this the other day with someone, and it turns out that for whatever reason, Stephen Fry, who is absolutely amazing reading the audiobooks, British editions, for Harry Potter, in the first book, he pronounces Malfoy like alternately with emphasis on the first or the second syllable. Just back and forth, like depending on where it falls in the sentence. Later, it never happens. Like later, it's always Malfoy, but there's like a lot of Malfoys, and not just. There's just like I've listened to this chapter specifically today, and all over the place. Just back and forth, kind of. Like he just couldn't decide which one was best. I don't know. It was interesting, and it was the only word that had any kind of inconsistency to it. And it wasn't like a huge deal because it doesn't get said that many times, but it gets said enough times. Right. It sometimes it's just a contest to see how many tangents you can have before you start. So anyway, the first sentence of the chapter does say, Harry had never believed that he would meet a boy he hated more than Dudley, but that was before he met Draco Malfoy. So yeah, you kind of like know what this chapter's about in a way, just by reading that sentence. But anyway, we move on. But it's mentioned that fortunately for Harry and for Ron too, because Ron pretty much hates him as well. In fact, really, the Gryffindors hate the Slytherins just pretty much on principle. They are the polar opposite sides of the situation, with sort of the Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs in the middle. But anyway, but it's mentioned that even though Harry really doesn't like Malfoy, they only have the potions with them, so he doesn't have to see him that much, because that's only one class, and it's that's not a huge portion of his day. Obviously, they're gonna kind of be around each other in the Great Hall and stuff, but they're on opposite sides again, so not a big deal there. And then, of course, as soon as that's mentioned, it's also mentioned that there's a notice up. Guess what? Flying lessons, kids. Flying lessons, and everybody's the first year is pretty excited about their first chance to try to fly. But Harry's like, first time I get to try getting on a broomstick, and this fucking Malfoy kid's gonna be around, and that's not like, what if I just completely? I mean, because that's the thing. I mean, well, first of all of us, nobody really wants to be embarrassed in life. It's just something that we actually go well out of our way to avoid most of the time. But Harry, he definitely because the narration is set up in this limited third person, where we're basically over the shoulder and sort of in the head of Harry most of the time during our story here. We get to see the things that he's worried about being embarrassed, and we get to see the things that he's worried about, is what I meant to say. And he's obviously worried about being embarrassed in front of anybody that he either likes or hates. And that's fairly normal, I would say, actually. But anyway, so yeah, of course, his reaction to seeing that they're going to be taking flying lessons with the Slytherins, he's just like, man, the worst luck. So it's interesting, because like I said, we've said before, and people will say about Harry that there's a lot of things that go right for him, or that he's either given or whatever. But I do think that Rowling does everything she can to sort of beat him up in the meantime. So that the things that he gets, at least it feels like he's somewhat earned them. And even, and of course, when you're 11 and you're in school, something like having class with what your arch nemesis is that's a legitimate punishment. Just like having classes with Snape is a legitimate punishment, so, yeah, anyway, that's sort of how I see that. But, and of course, but Ron, I mean, for his faults, man, Ron, there's so many times that he provides a nice little moral support and sort of a counterbalance for Harry. Because Harry expresses that fear out loud to Ron, because Ron's already his best friend. I mean, that pretty much happened on the train. That didn't take long. So he's like, you don't know, I mean, Malfoy talks all that shit, but that doesn't mean he's actually gonna be anything. He does seem like a talker, right? So, and Harry's like, yeah, maybe, but still, prefer it not be that way. But I mean, other classmates are mentioned to have also done some flying in their childhood and stuff like that, so Harry's just really hoping that he doesn't make an idiot out of himself, which, we'll see soon. Let's talk about Quidditch. Quidditch is mentioned a fair amount, just because obviously that's the sort of in relation to broomsticks, which are used for travel sometimes. You hear them mentioned more in relation to into relation to sport, in relation to Quidditch, than almost anything. So there's mention of that. We've got and then we always get a little extra mention about Neville. And of course, because Neville's barely magic, at least as it seems right now, and we find that with Neville, what it really represents is that he's got a severe lack of confidence and a severe self-esteem problem. I guess that's sort of the same thing, but whatever. All of those things he has, and as a result of those things, his magic is affected. He barely can do anything because you have to have, in this world, I mean, and really, I guess if there ever was any magic, you'd have to have some fucking, like, intention and determination and things like that, that are hard to have if you're, like, constantly worried about fucking up, or just even beyond that, just constantly, like, thinking that you're, like, that you just suck. He's Neville's. Actually, I can't really think of a good parallel character. Like sometimes like I almost wanted to say he's like Samuel Tarly, but like even Sam is an admitted coward. Like Neville just sort of. And actually, that's the thing about Neville. He's not made up the same way, really. So I can't. The comparison is no good there. Neville is a character that's set to evolve, and so that's part of why we get like little extra glimpses at him. I mean, Rowling mentions other classmates too to kind of help flesh out the world, so that by the time you get further and further in the story and these other people become, like bigger secondary characters, like you already kind of know a lot of little things about them, and that definitely happens with, well, mostly with the other people in the room with Harry they're in the room. What room, Brandon? The room they sleep in, their dormitory, is the room that was in my head. I just mean Dean Thomas, Seamus Finnegan, Neville Longbottom, and obviously Ron. And obviously Ron's going to be way higher up. But the other three, you usually get little side mentions of things that they're doing too, so that as, they all get older together and they're all still, sleeping in that same room and like basically are, more than just roommates. You understand like their relationships and who the people are as conflicts arise and things like that. You get the background and you get like the little quirks and you get just anyway. Enough. Yeah, it even talks about Ron and Dean getting into a little argument about the football because Ron like can't get in. He's like, "Why is that?" And of course, when I'm saying football right now, I actually mean soccer for all of you Americans. Or we need a word. Okay. Anyway, because Ron's like, "How could that be exciting?" There's no, it's just the typical like wizards looking at Muggle stuff and being like, "This is weird. It doesn't make sense to me." Oh, yeah. A little loud stereo out there in the valley. Very nice. All right. Very good. I'm getting louder. Okay, cool. Welcome to Puerto Rico, everybody. So anyway, yeah, Neville, never been on a broomstick either. And Hermione is mentioned as being almost as nervous as Neville, because here we've now come up upon something that you couldn't study how to do, really. You kind of, you have to trial and error this one, Hermione. A little more science than literature here, as it were. But I'm not really. I mean, you kind of almost have to pick on Hermione when you get your chance, because on the whole, she's pretty. I mean, in the first book, there's definitely more like Hermione moments. But even then, when it comes down to what she actually does and her impact on the story, like you can't really hate on Hermione at all. Like, yeah. Do you know in Lord of the Rings when Frodo says, and Frodo wouldn't have gotten very far if it wasn't for Sam. Yeah, Harry wouldn't have gotten very far if it wasn't for Hermione. I know I've probably already said that in an earlier episode, but it bears repeating, so you don't have to tell me that I said it again. It's cool. It needed to be said again. Right. We are moving like something that's fast. We're moving like that. is how we're moving. And of course, Hermione even got a copy of Quidditch Through the Ages. I mean, and of course, like, you know, that's not really, Anyway, again, it's a book. Flying isn't something you learn in a book. And it's mentioned that Harry hasn't gotten any more letters since Hagrid's little tea invitation. And Malfoy like gives him shit about that too, I guess, because he actually wastes his time during breakfast looking over at the Gryffindor table and seeing, if Harry's getting post when the owls swoop in. I mean, I guess it's not that hard to notice because there aren't that many snowy owls, that is, at Hogwarts anyway. Hedwig kind of stands out. She's top notch, that girl. And now, but even though nothing comes to Harry this day, Neville gets a package from his grandmother. It's his Remembrall, which is this this clear looking ball that has let's see, how is it described? I mean, I kind of feel like I already remember, but I wanted to see the wording. Full of white smoke. Yeah, so it's like a largish marble-sized thing. In the movie, well, see, that's another thing. It says here the size of a large marble. Don't know if that means anything different in England or not. Not sure. And in my mind, it's bigger than that because of what the movie showed, but also because it just wouldn't make sense for it. In my mind, a small marble is the kind of thing that if you close your hand around, I mean, it's a small marble, even a large marble, if you closed your hand around it, it would disappear. And this thing was something that was like more like not quite, like a baseball almost, was like around the size of the Remembrall in the movie, and kind of like what I guess I have stuck in my head because of that. But anyway, it's this this magical device that supposedly, if you have forgotten something, when you hold it in your hand, the smoke turns, like the whole thing turns red inside. Not the most practical device though, because if it doesn't magically also tell you what the thing that you forgot to do is, then like what the fuck? Like that doesn't. How magical is it really? I mean, I know it is, but. Like if it can tell that you somehow that you've forgotten something, then it should also be able to tell what that thing is. And like, I don't know how it would tell you, but it should be able to tell you because it's magic, and it doesn't. So of course, Neville's all excited that he got it, and then he's like demonstrates how to hold it, and of course it turns red. But he doesn't remember what he forgot, which brings me to. So when I was. Actually, I think I was in high school when this happened. I don't remember for sure, but I think so. I've always been fairly forgetful myself, and maybe more so when I was younger, because I think, I don't know, nerves and shit, but whatever. My grandmother decided that she saw these like pills to improve your memory pills or whatever, on like some fucking late night infomercial, I assume. And ordered them for me. And there's nothing like the irony of not being able to remember to take your memory pills. But that is exactly what happened. So we'll never know if that special blend of whatever the fuck it was in like, well, we're not going to talk about what year that was, but it was probably the most bogus shit ever anyway, but yeah, I totally didn't remember to take them, so it totally didn't matter either way. Not to mention that, like, I had a problem with swallowing pills, like, up until, I don't know, it took a long time. It was like a weird thing. That's neither here nor there. So I feel you, Neville. That's really my point. Like, it's his grandmother too. I mean, granted, I have my parents, so like it's not the same. But I mean, I was very close to my grandmother, so that's why it's kind of funny. Right. We move on. And of course, Malfoy shows up right as Neville's like having his little this embarrassing moment, and he snatched the Remember All out of Neville's hand because, of course, you're going to pick on the weakest one in Gryffindor, so that's what Malfoy does because he's a fucking prick. And of course, Harry and Ron, being the hot-headed Gryffindors that they are, jump to their feet immediately. But before anything really goes on, mind you, we're in the Great Hall here. McGonagall swoops in like really quickly and puts an end to that shit. So Malfoy, puts the thing back down, and that's that for then. And then we're on to the flying lesson. And it's mentioned that it's a clear, breezy day, and the grass rippled under their feet as they marched down the sloping lawns. So nice. Indeed. And then they go down to the grounds. The Slytherins are already there. And so, and there's 20 broomsticks, it says, which that means that the math I was trying to use to like inflate the Hogwarts numbers, totally not applicable if there's only 20 brooms there for the Slytherins in the first year. I mean, the Slytherins and the Gryffindors together. Because that's 10 and 10, and that's 5, 5, 5, 5, as you probably could figure out. 5 for, those are the dormitories that I was kind of, can you see that? I was right. Okay. In other words, 5 boys in each house, 5 girls in each house, those all together, 20. I still don't see how that gets you enough people to go watch a Quidditch match and fill the stands on both sides, or not both sides, all the way around. Well, whichever. I don't understand your math. I don't get it. Right. So, Madam Hooch shows up, and it's another thing that's kind of interesting. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. I guess maybe she's just a part-time teacher, but outside of doing this one lesson at the beginning of, or maybe, do flying lessons continue after this scene, and we just don't see them again because of what happens to Harry, which we'll see in a few minutes? Because I'm like, outside of this and like officiating the Quidditch matches, like, what does Hooch do? Does she have like, is there any other kind of like magical PE? I don't even know what the hell that would be. It doesn't even make sense. The more even just saying it out loud, I don't, whatever. I did like how they actually made Madam Hooch look like she's described in the movie with her short gray hair and yellow eyes. I thought that was pretty. I think they're yellow. There definitely were something about them that was interesting. They weren't just normal. I should get in the habit of watching the scenes before instead of waiting till I get my screenshot after, just for fun, because that'd be something else to talk about. So yeah, I'll do that. Most likely. And of course, as soon as she shows up, she's like, what are you guys waiting on? Let's get these brooms up. And so they have to hold out their arms or their hands over the broom and say up. And of course, or maybe not of course, I just like to say that word or those words a lot. But counter to Harry's concerns, his broom comes straight up to his hand, like, no problem. And he's, like, one of the only ones. Like, Hermione's is just kind of rolling around on the ground, and, like, most people, it isn't going so well for everybody else. And so she has to get them they have to get that worked out, but Harry, first time, boom. And then we we get a mention that they learn how to actually, how to sit on it without falling off, and how to what a proper grip looks like, and that Malfoy's been doing his grip wrong all of his life, which is, a nice little fun moment for Ron and Harry. And now they're going to do their first little, not really, just sort of a little test. They're not really supposed to fly. They're just supposed to kick off and then, like, hover for a minute and then let yourself, like, go back down. Like, you lean forward slightly, it says, and come back down to the ground. And so she gives them a count, and before she gets done with her count, Neville kicks off because he's nervous and he doesn't want to be the last one. So, and then he just whooshes off, Neville. Like, poor boy. But again, if you like look beyond like the oh Jesus, this poor kid, you see that underneath all that lack of confidence is somebody who was actually able to, like, if he wasn't like freaked the fuck out, he was able. He kicked up and kicked off and flew. Yeah, it was a disaster, but the point, it's like a hint that the power's in there, I guess, is sort of my point. At least that's how I feel about it right now in this moment. And then he rises really high, 20 feet. And then he falls off his broom and lands in the heap. And obviously that's a nasty fall. That's 2 stories. And the broom just flies off. Like, I guess because it didn't have anybody controlling it, it just sort of drifted on its own magic or whatever. It's flying magic. It's whatever charm. So he has a broken wrist, and Madam Hooch has to take him off to the hospital wing. And instead of getting a student to do it, of course, we need a teacherless situation here. So Madam Hooch is going to take him. I mean, and don't get me wrong, Neville just fell 2 stories, so it's probably not a bad idea for a teacher to take him. It's a little different than what happened in Potions. But damn, it is Neville to the hospital wing again, isn't it? Fuck. I just thought about that. 2 chapters in a row. What Madame Pomfrey must think about Neville. Jesus. Anyway. Things I never thought about for whatever reason. And of course, again, to set up the teacherless situation, she's like, none of you move, and none of you do anything with the broomstick, and don't do anything stupid. I'll be back. Taking this kid to the hospital wing. Y'all don't do anything. Nothing. Okay? You hear me, right? Don't do anything. Maybe she wasn't that adamant, but she was kind of adamant. And so as soon as we have our teacherless moment, we of course, Malfoy speaks up and starts making fun of Neville because, again, he's the weak one, and now he's not even there, and there's no teacher around this time. It's not in the Great Hall anymore. We're out on the grounds a little ways away from the castle with nobody really close by. And so, of course, Gryffindors stick up for Longbottom, for Neville, and then Malfoy notices that Neville dropped his Remembrall because, of course, he did. He fell 20 feet out of the sky. Somehow it didn't break, but then again, it's magic, so we'll leave that part alone. Maybe it's not even regular glass, for all we know. It probably has like an unbreakable charm on it or some shit. And it may not even be that heavy either. So anyway, so then he's always like, oh, look, I found this stupid thing, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, Harry's like, give it to me. I'll be taking that. And he's like, yeah, no, I'm not, I'm not going to just give it to you. Like, that's not how we play this game. Like, you don't ask for something from me and then I just do it. So And then Harry's like, no, dude, give it to me. Like, somehow he doesn't know that that's not how the game's going to work out. And then Malfoy decides to hop on a broom. And so here we have one of those moments where if Harry wasn't, well, I guess we could just say if Harry wasn't Harry, really, because obviously this is part of who he is, but if he wasn't so hot-headed, this is a situation that Malfoy could get in trouble and Harry could not get in trouble. However, as we'll see soon, the consequences of what's about to happen don't exactly work out the way you think they're going to. So, Malfoy shoots up in his broom and goes up fairly high, like around the treetops nearby. And so Harry's like, "Fuck. All right, fine. You want to go? All right." Grabs the broom, grabs the broom he was using earlier, and like immediately just kicks off and flies. And all of a sudden, Harry's like, "Whoa. Whoa, holy shit, I can do this. Like, I don't have to think. This is like eating and breathing. Like, this is something I can do. I really like this." So, all fear pretty much set aside at this point, he just goes right after Malfoy, and he's like, "Hey, so now, now that you're up here by yourself, why don't you go ahead and give me that fucking remember all?" And otherwise, I'll just, knock you off that broom there. And Malfoy tries to be like, yeah, sure. But he's kind of like got a little sense of concern has come over him, because I don't think he was really betting on Harry being able to be a good flyer. Like, he was expecting Harry to chase him, yes, but he was expecting that to go badly. And instead, Harry squared up right on him, like, leg up. And so, yeah, Malfoy's like, let's see. Oh, wait a minute. Right. So then Harry's like, he basically realizes what the thing to do is. I mean, and that's one of the things I like about Harry, is that he will take action. And even, like I said, situations I'm not sure that in my life I would have taken action if I was in this situation. He totally just takes action. And you could question it, but whatever. So he decides that the best thing to do is to just fly straight at Malfoy, because obviously he's unnerved him by being up there in the first place. And also, spoiler alert, I can fly. Holy shit. So, and of course it goes pretty much like he expects it to, and Malfoy just does get out of the way in time. And Harry's like, "No, now give me the damn thing." And Malfoy's like, "Yeah." And he... so Malfoy, like, because he's basically kind of been sort of defeated in this little game that he tried to play with Harry, he decides his last thing to do will be to toss this thing, because obviously he's still not going to just give it up. Like, that part isn't going to change. So instead of making a fool out of Harry by, getting him to fly, that didn't work out. So now the new plan is, I'm just going to toss this thing as far as I can, up and away from Harry, and then I'm going to fly back to the ground, because I kind of fucked up the rest of this little bit. And hopefully he won't be able to catch it, and it'll still fall. Maybe it'll break this time. So he tosses it, and then Harry pulls out the real moves, and he goes into this big dive as the thing is falling, and he manages to catch it just before it hits the ground, and he manages to make like this fairly soft landing, just rolls onto the grass. I mean, and basically Harry's made his first Quidditch save, but without playing a game, essentially. So yeah, that happens, and as soon as he hits the ground and straightens up, the first thing he hears is McGonagall, Harry Potter. And of course, because you can't, win the little match with Malfoy there and then just, walk away scot-free. There has to be something, right? Well, kinda. Anyway, so she comes up and she's just like, I can't believe you. Like, you, of all the things, you might have broken your neck. Like, this is insane. And some of the Gryffindors, to their credit, try to, like, be like, Malfoy was, and she's like, no, I'm not hearing any of that shit that you got to say. Like, Potter, come on, follow me. And so they march off in silence, and everybody else is probably just like, oh, but, we don't know because we're following Harry, so we can't hear them doing that. I'm just giving you a little inside scoop there as to what's probably going on in the background. So, up into the castle, and Harry's just like, oh, fuck. Like, and on his way out, of course, he sees, like, Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle all looking, like, triumphant and excited that Harry's gotten in trouble, and Malfoy was already back on the ground, so he didn't get in trouble, and, so yeah, Harry's just, like, definitely expecting the worst, like, just following McGonagall to his doom. And she doesn't speak, and they're just, marching through the castle. And then and Harry's, like, gone so far as to, like, imagining himself being full on expelled. And he's like, maybe I could be Hagrid's assistant. And he's like, oh, God. I'm a first year. I can't be thinking about that now. But, watching the other kids do their school, finish their schooling, and him, like, carrying a bag or some shit for Hagrid, he's really worried. I mean, with a decent reason. I mean, obviously it doesn't seem likely that his punishment would be that severe, but, obviously it wasn't something he was supposed to get caught doing. So he just does. And plus, I mean, he's never been in Hogwarts. This is his first experience, and this is his first really getting in trouble moment. Or at least that's what we are led to believe is going to happen. So they stop outside of a classroom, and it's Flitwick's classroom, and McGonagall sticks her head in, and she's like, can I borrow wood for a minute? And Harry's like, wood? Jesus, is she gonna beat me with something? Like, what the fuck, man? Turns out, though, that Wood is a fifth-year student, and he is, in fact, borrowed from that class, and he comes out and follows the two of them, and McGonagall continues on a little ways and then points them into an empty classroom. And Peeves is in there, and McGonagall is able to get rid of Peeves because she's a teacher, and she's also the deputy headmistress, which means that she's number 2, if that, just FYI, in the school. So then an introduction is made, and we meet Oliver Wood, who I like Oliver Wood. I'm a Wood fan. Excuse me. Just because, I'm not a huge sports person, but I've followed football for a long time, and by this football, I now mean American football, not soccer, or European football, whatever, but not that. I mean American football, and, I can only imagine when you have a team, what it's like to try, especially with Quidditch, it's different in a lot of ways. There's fewer people involved. But, I understand. I sympathize with the pulling for your team kind of thing. And then I just, you also just get into the story, and you're obviously, pulling for whatever house you're pulling for and all that kind of thing. So anyway, Wood's very passionate about Quidditch, and I don't know. I like him. It's not just that. Like he just seems like a good, as a character, he's a good guy, and he does come back into play later, although not majorly. But he's around for a few more books, so let's not, write him off yet. Jesus. Anyway, so McGonagall introduces Harry to Wood and Wood to Harry, and Wood's still just looking like, okay, Harry. Obviously, he knows who Harry Potter is, but like, so then McGonagall turns to Wood and she's like, Wood, I've found you a seeker. And Wood is like elated, and Harry's still like, I don't know what you guys are talking about, like, at all. But, it doesn't seem like I'm getting in trouble. So there's that. But then McGonagall like goes on to describe like what Harry did and what she saw in the dive and the catch or save, as it were. And she's like, was that your first time on a broomstick? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, yeah, he's a natural. Like, 50-foot dive, like, this shit is fucking insane. Like, you've got a guy. I know the first year. So here we go, right from punishment to exception. I don't, I don't feel bad about it. I don't think there's anything. I mean, I know it's like in most characters it would go to their head, but it doesn't. It's not Harry. So anyway, right off the bat, McGonagall's like, we're gonna see. Well, I'll see about Dumbledore. Making an exception for the first year rule for this and the broom thing and the whole nine. Now, of course, she's like, I want to hear that you're training hard because I might, change my mind about punishing you because, hey, sports achievement. That's important. But McGonagall, as we learn here, is a pretty big-time Quidditch fan of her house, and she very still feeling the sting from the last Gryffindor loss to Slytherin, and she makes comments about not being able to look Snape in the eyes. But again, who wants to look Snape in the fucking eyes in the first place? But that's neither here nor there. And then she softens and she says, your father would be proud. And we learn basically through those kind of actions that not only do the teachers have some sympathy for Harry, but that also that they loved his parents as students and as people. So, there's that whole aspect, which is, part of why some of the things I think happen with Harry that they do. Obviously, they have sympathy for him, but they know where he came from and yeah. Anyway, they're invested emotionally, is what I'm really trying to say. So, cut scene to dinner time, and Ron's like, holy shit, really? You didn't get in trouble? You're on the Quidditch team? And, Ron kind of like sometimes vacillates between being Harry's best friend and being sort of like Harry Potter's biggest fan. And this is one of those moments where he's kind of just like in awe of the fact that like, because he knows that like most people would not have gotten away with that shit. Like that's just fact. Hashtag facts. True facts. And we find out that Harry is in fact the youngest house player in a century. Because Wood knew. And Ron just is so, he's amazed and impressed that he just gapes at Harry. And then Fred and George come in, and they come straight over, and they're like, yeah, Wood told us we're on the team too. And they're great, because that's, again, even though Ron is absolutely Harry's best friend, best mate, as it were. Yes, I know the difference. I mean, not the difference, the fact that those are two different ways of saying the same thing. That's what I meant to say. There's still like a separate relationship that Harry has with the twins, and I've touched on that before, but I think it's kind of cool because the twins are great, and I know that if I was Harry, I would probably want to be friends with them in addition to Ron too, because sometimes when you have a friend that has a family, you get to know their family kind of, but you're still you're really mainly just around the friend. But with Harry and the Weasleys, like on a large scale, he gets to know all of them fairly well. Obviously, one more than others that's not even involved right now. But yeah, so the Fred and George thing is kind of cool, and they get to play Quidditch together, and they just have sort of a different thing. But anyway, and everybody's spirits are up now because they have a good seeker, and that's like, we still haven't gotten the full description yet because that's coming in another chapter with Wood, but just to kind of give that one summary for somebody who doesn't know, I feel like everybody knows, but just to say it, one of the only way that the game can actually be won is that there's this one ball that flies around with like wings literally, and it's called the Golden Snitch. It's smaller than all of them, and it's the Seeker's job exclusively to just find and catch this one ball. And there's one Seeker per team, and that's what they do. They just fly around looking for that, and that's why Harry's particular type of flying and build and all that kind of thing is suited for this. Where was I going with that? Shit. Damn it, man. Tangents about why. Oh, just so the point being is that when the Seeker catches the snitch, the game ends, and also a certain number of points. I can't remember the exact number, but a certain number of points are added to the score. So the match ends or the game ends, and those points are added, and then the score is determined. The final score is determined. So whoever, most of the time, the team who catches the snitch is the one that wins, because if the rest of the game is going relatively evenly, or even just not a blowout, then you're catching the snitch is enough points usually to get you over the hump, even if you're not winning, by a large margin or whatever, or if you're losing by like not a large margin, whatever. You know what the fuck I'm trying to say. Math and shit. I used to be good at that, but man, like let's keep it moving. So yeah, optimism is high now. They have a good Seeker. Point. Long story. TLDR. And so then we get mention of Lee Jordan, who is one of Fred and George's classmates, and like kind of. Okay, so this brings me to something else, actually. I just remembered. And this is so much later, but who knows if I'll ever get that far, so I'll just say this now. Pretty much throughout most of the time that Fred and George are in school, Lee Jordan is kind of like their third partner in pretty much everything they do. And then somehow later, when they leave Hogwarts to start their own joke shop, he's not anymore. I never really, like, that's always been kind of weird to me. I'm like, what happened to Lee Jordan after all those years, like years, 7 years of going to school together? And, like, I don't know. That always was a little strange to me, because, I mean, she spent all that time. It's not like Rowling could have completely forgotten the character. She's not likely to have done that. But anyway. So but the whole mention of that was really in passing, that just Fred and George were going to go off and like see some shit. Like Jordan thinks that he found another way out of the school, a secret passage, and they're like, yeah, it's probably something that we found back in our first week, but they're going to go check anyway. And then Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle show up expecting like to find out that Potter's getting ready to be like expelled and sent home on the train, and Harry's like, oh, wow, you're a lot braver now that you're back on the ground with your little friends. And, of course, really, Harry? Little friends? But, hey, it's funny. There's nothing little about Crabbe and Goyle, but yeah. And Malfoy's like, I'd take you on anytime. Just me and you. Wizard's Duel. We could do it tonight. So there, Ron, and she's like, you don't even know what that is, do you? And Ron's like, yes, he does. I'm his second. Who's yours? And so it's a fucking challenge. do it. Yeah, so then after they leave, Harry's like, what's a wizard's duel? Like, what the fuck, dude? Like, wait a minute. And what's a second? And Ron's like, seconds are there, to take over if you die. And he's like, what? And he's like, no, don't. Chill. None of us knows enough to kill each other. Like, that's pretty much impossible. So, anyway. And he's like, what if nothing happens? And he's like, throw it away and punch him. Thanks, Ron. But, practical advice, I suppose. And then Hermione shows up. Because, of course, she does. And Ron snaps, or not snaps, but Ron retorts just by, like, her showing up and being like, excuse me. And Ron's like, can't we just eat in peace around here? Like, what are you doing here? Just always with the attitude when Hermione shows up. And she's like, yeah, I couldn't help overhearing what you guys were talking about. And Ron's like, yeah, sure, you couldn't. And then she goes into her little rant about it. And she's like, you mustn't go wandering around at the school at night. Think of the points you'll lose for Gryffindor if you're caught. And it's just, and you're bound to be. It's really very selfish of you. And Harry, like, to Harry's credit, like, he doesn't always leave Ron to be the one to retort to Hermione. He's like, and it's kind of like none of your business. Like, nobody asked you if we should do this thing or not. Like, what are you doing? And Ron's like, yeah, peace. And so anyway, now let's see. Now we've gotten into the evening, and we're waiting for the time because the duel is set for midnight. Of course it is, in the trophy room, right? Yes, I believe so. And so yeah, they're gonna do it. They're gonna go like Harry's again. His and this is interesting too because this is just pride, really. Because I mean, this isn't something that anybody else could witness, really. I mean, it's not like they're not in front of all their other classmates now. This is something that's been supposedly planned in the middle of the night in a room somewhere that nobody's gonna be in. So if Harry didn't go, like, Malfoy could say whatever he wanted to say, but Harry could be like, "Oh, I went and you weren't there." And I mean, who's to really know who's telling the truth? But no, because he's been challenged, his pride is at stake. So he must go. And so all the other class or their dorm mates, whatever, are asleep. But Ron and Harry are staying up, and finally at 11:30, they decide to get up and go. And they get to the common room, and guess who's waiting? Hermione. Because, in Hermione's heart's in the right place. She doesn't want her house to lose points. She doesn't want her house for getting in trouble. But it's amazing that she actually would stay up out of bed and hanging out in the common room waiting to see if these two boys were going to go do this dumb thing or not. But you got to love her for it, too. And Hermione's like, I almost told your brother, Ron. And she's like, and Ron's like, wow. And even Harry's like, I can't believe somebody would be this interfering. He doesn't say that, but that's what's said that he thinks. And so they go, and Hermione follows them because she is nothing if not persistent and often actually helpful, but nonetheless, Jesus Christ, Hermione. But we'll later see that she's helpful anyway, despite her disapproval of this whole thing. And she's continuing to, that's the thing. She's convinced that she's going to somehow get them to turn back before they get all the way. So she's not just necessarily setting out to follow them. She's still trying to like stop this madness and get them back in. And she's, don't you even care about Gryffindor? Don't you only care about yourselves? Blah, 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 blah. And they're like, go away. Like, leave us. Well, I warned you, and just remember what I said. And when you're on the train home tomorrow, and But anyway, so she turns back, and she's like, she is going to give up. And then she turns back, and the fat lady's not in her portrait. She's gone off to visit somebody else. Her friend Violet, most likely. And she's like, fuck. So now Hermione can't get back in, so she's like, well, I'm coming with y'all. And Ron's like, no, you're not. And she's like, yeah, I am. I'm not standing out here waiting to get caught. Just hanging out in the corridor. So, and she's like, if anybody finds us, I'll just tell them the truth. That you were trying, that I was trying to stop you and you can back me up. And you got some nerve, Ron says. Because, Jesus. And then Harry's like, shut up, both of you. And so we have like the perfect, in like 3 lines, we have like the perfect microcosm of the Harry, Ron, and Hermione dynamic. Because Hermione's like going on about something, and then Ron like snaps at her, and then Harry snaps at both of them. Like, shut up the bickering. Like, hush, I heard something. And so the something that he heard was Neville, and it's a snuffling sound, because Neville is the kind of person who would be snuffling when he's nervous and worried, just. And Neville's like, oh, thank goodness you found me. And it's like, now suddenly there's like, what was supposed to be 2 people like tiptoeing off to the trophy room is now 4 people who 2 of which don't really belong at all. And something is distinctly British about this particular moment of humor to me, the comedy of like the fact that instead of the next thing being like another obstacle directly, like an antagonistic obstacle, Jesus Christ, antagonistic obstacle, even if that's something you would ever say, those are the words. Instead of that, it's Neville, and Neville's like, oh, I'm so glad you found me, and they're like, oh, fuck, shut up, dude, like, we're just, oh, fuck. Like, just, can you keep your voice down, like, just enough. And they're telling him the password, but they're like, also the fat lady's not there. So they're like, good luck. We'll see you later. And Neville's like, no, don't leave me. So, of course, now, again, party of 4. Party of 4. And Ron's like, if either one of you get us caught, I'll never rest until I've learned the curse of the bogies. And then Hermione's like looking like she's about ready to tell him how you could actually do that, but Harry's like, enough, everybody, with the quiet shit, okay? Because we're still out in the corridors in the school after hours. So even though Harry's doing this damn thing, he's also like aware of the fact that they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing. And so they move along now relatively quietly, all as their little group. And they keep expecting to like get in trouble as they turn around every corner, but so far everything's worked out. And then they get to the trophy room, and of course, shocker alert, Malfoy and Crabbe not present, not gonna be present. So Harry gets his wand out, and they're like, they're late. I wonder what's going on. And then they hear a noise in the next room, and they're like, oh, shit, what the fuck is that? And they wait, and then they hear Filch talking to Mrs. Norris, and it sounds like they're looking for somebody, because he's like, they might be lurking in a corner. And they're like, oh, no, Filch is on to us, and we just got here. So they they go towards a door that's away from Filch's voice, which of course there's always a door in the opposite direction of where you need to not be. And then they get through the door, and then they go down through different places, and they're running through the castle, and they eventually oh, and of course we have one of those. I almost forgot that this happened. Oh yeah, okay. So I just had to make sure I saw this exactly right. So anyway, Neville like freaks out, tries to run, falls, grabs Ron by the waist, and then topples into a suit of armor that then clangs and crashes everywhere, and they just all like haul ass at that point. And then they're really like sprinting through the school and like having to go through like several different passageways and just doing all kinds of shit. And eventually they get somewhere that's completely away from the trophy room. And Hermione, straight to the scolding. I told you. And it's like they're not even safe yet. So like enough with the fucking I told yous. But so they're like, yeah, we got to get back to the tower. And she's like, Malfoy tricked you, and it's like, dude, enough with the like whatever you've got to say right now. Like we are still not in the clear. So they set off, and they don't get too far, and then they run into Peeves. Of course they do. And he's like, oh, wandering around after midnight, are you? Little first years. This is prime mayhem opportunity right here for old Peevesy. And so they're like, no, just don't, keep... They don't know enough about Peeves to realize that, like, once you've been seen, you're pretty much screwed. Like, it's not like he's just going to let you run off. Like, nobody's really friends with Peeves. Like, you could possibly align with him at times, but more, nobody's really, like, Peeves is on Peeves' side, period. So they get frustrated with him, and Ron fucking tries to take a swipe at him. And that's when he just yells, first years! First years in the corridor, or no, he's just students out of whatever, he yells and he raises the alarm. That's what I'm trying to fucking say. And so they make a run forward again, and they get to the end of the corridor they're at, where they run into a door that's locked, and they're like, fuck. And Hermione's like, get out of the way, and she whips out her wand, and of course she's memorized like 15,000 spells already, and it's year one, but fuck it. Alohomora is a useful spell, and she uses it, and the door unlocks. Because, of course, Dumbledore didn't have any extra protection on this one door other than it being locked. Whatever. So they get in there, and they get the door closed before anybody can see anybody. And then they just listen, and they hear a funny little conversation between Filch and Peeves, where Filch then, like, even though, and this is what I said a minute ago, just because Peeves ratted on them in a sense by, like, raising the alarm, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's on Filch. He's obviously not on Filch's side either. So Filch shows up, and then Peeves is all like, and he's, Filch is all like, tell me where they are. And he's like, won't say nothing if you don't say please. And, Filch is like, hell, you damn poltergeist. Blah, 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 blah. And he's like, well, say please, whatever. And so finally he's like, fine, please. And then, of course, Peeves is like, nothing. Like, I'm stupid and I wasn't ever going to tell you anyway. So that basically is a fruitless conversation, which leaves Filch with nothing, like no discernible direction to go now, just because he's been alerted to the fact that there were students out of bed. He still has no idea where the fuck they are. So eventually, the footsteps fade and everybody's gone. And so, and Harry's like, Like, Neville, get off me. What are you doing? Like, Neville's been, like, tugging on his robes this whole time while they've been inside this little room that they ducked into off the corridor. And Harry's like, what is it? And then he turns around. And then it was like he'd walked into a nightmare. And it turns out that it's not just a room, it's a corridor. And it's not an empty corridor, it's the forbidden corridor on the 3rd floor. And now they know why it's forbidden. Jesus Christ. Of all the things that Harry or any of them have to encounter, this is actually, in a lot of ways, one of the most terrifying ones, potentially. There is a giant dog in this room, and this giant dog has 3 giant heads. And it is not asleep right now. And it is just, or it's just woken up anyway, I guess. And it's looking at them with all 6 of its eyes. And Harry realizes that the only reason why they're not dead yet is because they surprised it just running in there out of nowhere. And he's like, well, between Filch and this thing, fuck it. Suspend me, expel me, whatever you got to do. So they run out. Of course, nobody's there because Filch and Peeves have moved on. And this time they're able to sprint their way all the way back to the Gryffindor common room. And fortunately, the fat lady is now, when they really need to get back inside, there. And she's all like, where have you guys been? And they're like, none of that shit. Pig snout, which is the password in this particular case. And they get back inside. And so yeah, they're safe now. Everybody made it back in. Hooray. Tragedy averted, even though lots of crazy shit happened. And Ron's like, what in the fuck is up with that dog? Well, why is that in a school? If any dog needs exercise, this one does. And, yeah. And Hermione's like, well, what was it standing on? And they're like, I wasn't really looking at what it was fucking standing on. Did you see it? Did you see those teeth and those eyes and those... And anyway, they're like, what? And she's like, no, it wasn't just standing on the floor. It was standing on a trapdoor. It's obviously guarding something. She's like, I hope you're pleased with yourselves. We could have all been killed, or worse, expelled. And so then she traipses off to bed, and Ron's like, no, we don't mind if you go to bed. Peace, like, not even peace, just get the fuck on. He's just like, wow, like you'd think we'd, like, dragged you along. But, anyway. But now, of course, that situation and that piece of information that Hermione just gave them gives Harry something to chew on now. He's like, what is that thing guarding? And what did Hagrid say? That Gringotts was the safest place in the world for something you wanted to hide, except for Hogwarts? Well, looks like we have a pretty good idea where that little package is probably hiding, it says. And, yeah, that's probably true. But, well, you know, that's... The details of that will come in a future episode. Because that is the end of that chapter. So, what do we got? We got the Malfoy and Harry rivalry is set up. It's pretty much front and center for this whole chapter. We found out that Harry is an amazing flyer and that he's going to be on the Quidditch team, even though he doesn't even really know what Quidditch is yet exactly. I mean, he does, but he doesn't understand it yet. We've seen, even though Hermione is not officially Harry and Ron's friend yet, we've seen how the dynamic between the three of them is going to play out to a large degree. Essentially, Hermione saved the day. She unlocked the door, And she also was the one who spotted the things that nobody else saw. She saw the trapdoor. Like I said, Hermione's a big part of any success Harry has, especially in the first 6 books. And that's another thing. More often than not, if there's something that comes up and Hermione like just states something that's as a fact, usually she's right. It's not really until like the last book that I feel like when there's a conflict that Harry's the one that's right. Most of the time it's Hermione that's right. So anyway, yeah, I believe that that's pretty much everything that I had to cover in this one. It's a little bit of a, holy shit. Yeah, it's a longer chapter and a longer episode that we've got going here. So, wow. I knew when I started it was going to be a long one. It's a longer chapter, and there's a lot of scenes, a lot of things that happen. So anyway, since we've taken all this extra time, holy cow, we will end it here, and we will see you back very soon. Thank you for listening. Do the likey thingies and the comedy thingies. If you have things you want to talk about, questions you want to ask, things you want to correct me on, any of that stuff, do those things. And we'll see you back here soon. Peace.